Okay.
All right.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the second day of department days. Uh, for this session, we will have two speakers, Edwin Truman and Nabila Sindi, and they will introduce to you the industrial design department. But first, can I ask everyone to uh, turn their cameras on and then change their names. Uh, okay. It seems like not everyone is around yet. So, hmm. Okay, then I guess we can just start and they'll maybe they're just getting ready or something. All right. So, may I ask the speaker to share the screen and then they can start their presentation.
All right. All right. Hi guys. I'm Edwin. I am with me today is
Nabila.
so like I'm a fourth year student in Department of Industrial Design. I am majoring and Nabila is minoring. And today basically we are it's kind of an informal presentation. We just want to share what we know about our department, IDKs, and what students would who don't know about IDKs yet should know and what to expect. Yeah, and like we're going to go over like some stuff. So, but can you guys see my screen? Like any response or any chat or anything? All good.
I can see the screen room. Yeah.
All right. I'm also minoring in computer science. Oh, Nabila is going to double major. Right.
Yeah.
My bad. All right. So starting off. Where is the ID building? So for those of you that do not know, ID building is located in North. It's the building code is N25 and it is just right beside the undergrad library, or it's very close to like the humanities building. So it's the building with the lights at night. If you guys pass through Lateria, probably see the building. Um, Yeah, so start off, what I want to clarify is that there are two large misconception about industrial design. Like, I'm not sure about whether how people perceive it or whether you know about industrial design already or not. But at least back in my country, both me and Nabila come from Indonesia. People do not know about industrial design. So when we explain about industrial design, they probably go, "Oh, you manufacture things in factory, right? Or you do factory production." We do not do those stuff. So ID is not equal to IE. We are not industrial engineering. We are very different. And the second common misconception is that, oh, you are very creative and you're very good at art. You don't have to be good at art, or you don't have to be able to even draw to be a major in ID. So I think that's something that everyone should know, and it's a very common misconception that people have. So Nabila, do you want to talk a bit about this?
Sure. So, some stuff you would want to think about before you actually do ID is like, ID would be right for you if you prefer doing projects instead of like exams. And then it's very like creation oriented. So you make a lot of like uh deliverables like digitals or hardware. And then you focus on like processes that involve people. So you're really interested in how to deliver stuff to the user. So that's like really important. And also you want to learn how to communicate your ideas because you know you have to learn how to design it in a way that people understand. and stuff like that.
Yep. So yeah, those are all correct. And especially in ID, we really do a lot of group projects. So like your communication skills will automatically be better just by taking ID classes. So I'm going to go through like simply what are the branches that ID is a really large it's a very large superset, I guess. There are a lot of branches even in ID. And if you major in ID, you're going to learn all of this. So it's usually divided by the years actually. So in the first year, you are going to learn about product design or lo-fi design, more like shapes, aesthetics, how do you actually create a good looking product or a functional product, but a very low level type. So very it's the function of those product is really usually just from their shape. You don't really make digital products or anything like that. For example, I'm going to go through it later, but in your second year, your second year first semester, you are going to take a class called product design, which you need to make in that class you need to make a chair. So those kind of very low fidelity design. And then the second year, you're going to learn about physical computing, mostly making a second and third year. You're going to make smart products, I guess, like products that has more interaction. So there are classes called interactive product design or interactive prototyping. So in this class, you are going to do physical computing, usually with Arduino, if you guys have ever heard of that. So you do some coding in this major as well. And then the third and fourth year, you are going to focus on UX and UI. So I don't know if you have ever heard these terms, but these are rising terms, UX and UI, especially in startups. So UX focuses on the user experience of things. So you learn how people use things and how people interact with them, and you create a system that accommodates for that. So for example, you learn um, for example, nowadays that people are not able to like we have to decrease face-to-face contact, then most of the cafes or even Kaimaru, they start using those what do you call it, the booth where you order thing, the vending machine, like those system, how you design them and how it relates to people's needs. It's what we learn in UX, and UI is more about the look of the system, the interface, how friendly it is. For example, um, is this button noticeable? Like those kind of very small details. Is this if the button is red, what does it mean? What is a good size for a button? Those kind of very small details that actually helps the user. So yeah, those are the I would say those are the four branches of ID. There are also like the theoretical branch, but we only have one class for that called design methodology. It's also related to UX, but it's more about theoretically how do you pace yourself to the user studies. So it's still a part of UX. We also have a lab for that. So after that, me and Nabila, we're going to explain about the classes that we have in ID and the roadmap, what we should take. Nabila is going to explain the first half because she has taken up to junior level classes. I am taking senior level classes. So Nabila, you can explain.
Okay. Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
So usually how they structure the program is by these steps. So when you're delivering a product, it's either like hardware or software or like both of them. And also as you go up the year, the complexity of like the problem that you have to solve is like harder. So like for example, can you go to the next slide? For example, on the first year, I think Edwin already mentioned this, but we take stuff like basic design and product design. Like they're focused more on like how you shape the stuff and then like how how it fits in your hands and stuff like that. But it's not really focusing on like it's not really like a final product that you can like ship or stuff like that. Like we also start thinking about like the problem solving aspect, like, oh, this squeezer is not usable for people like this. How can we like fix it? But it's more on like a very small level, and it's basically like an introductory of like, how would, if you were to make this kind of product, how would you do it? Like what kind of paint, what kind of like materials that you would use. And then I think these basic design and product design classes really help you get a sense of like, oh, if I were to make a product from scratch, then this is how I would do it and stuff like that. But it's not really focused on like delivering it to the user, but more about like how the process happens. And the next would be, can you go to the next slide? So for this class, I think it goes up for this year, it goes up the graph. So we're focusing more on like how you can incorporate the software into the hardware and make it like more interactive. Like as Edwin mentioned, we actually try doing stuff with Arduino. So maybe previously in the basic design or product design class, you make like a chair, but then a chair is like pretty static. So like once you make it, then all the functionality is there, and there's non like hidden functionality or something. But for example, if you make like the vending machine that Edwin said, that it's shaped like a vending machine, but then when you interact with it, it gives you feedback and such like that. So we're learning how to make those kinds of stuff, and also try to incorporate more of like real world problems. Like in UX design, maybe you're given like an overall theme, and then your group has to like think about how you can make an interactive product, like a hardware and a software, and then like use it to fix that, not fix, but like solve that problem. So yeah, I think we can go to the next slide.
All right. For senior year, I would categorize like UX design, user experience design for senior year class. So as Nabila mentioned, you learn about those kind of real life problems. You have like around 4 or 5 weeks to define problem, and then you have to solve it in a group. And then you don't actually, it doesn't always necessarily have to be a problem, but it could be a user enhancing experience. For example, what if when you are walking, you could listen to like conversations of people that walked through the road in the past. This kind of unique, new way of experiencing something. Those are the types of stuff that you do in UX design, and you do it with a group. So yeah, it's quite fun. And for the senior year, first year, you're going to take system design. This is like the pinnacle of all what you do in the 3 years. So in here you work with a company, and then you are going to actually design a concept for them. Like for example, the one that I took, it was 2000 first half of 2020, so last year. We worked together with NH, what do you call it, 투자증권 is NH Holdings. No, they're like the broker for like NH investments. Oh, in securities, NH investment in securities. So we designed a financial app for them, like investment app, and then they pay us by giving us awards, and also we get to submit our ideas to international design awards. And a few of us, actually all the teams that participated won like last year. So it was a quite cool experience. And then in that class, you actually work in teams of 4 to 5, and you design everything from like rationality, why would you need it, and like you actually pitch it to the company, and they just like give you feedbacks, and then you keep iterating. Well, you don't actually create the final software. You reach a level called hi-fi prototyping. So all the interfaces, all the looks, all the interactions, you have to show it, but you don't actually have to code like you don't have to build the back end version of the system. So that's the cool part of ID. You don't have to do all this. You can just, after you finish the idea, you work together with developer to create it. So yeah, that's the final, like the pinnacle of what you learn in all the 3 years. But if you want to go even further, starting from 2017, it is not a major required anymore, but there's a class called Graduation Design Studio. I'm currently taking it. This is an individual class. So in this class, it's a very free class. you choose the topic, you choose what you want to make, and you make it. That's it. But it takes 1 year, so it's 2 semesters. In the first half, you are going to make the prototype. You're going to make the ideation and the rough prototype, like what you want to make. In the final second part, you are going to make the product. So the product needs to be as final as possible. It needs to be you need to be able to demo it in public. So we are going to go to this year. We're going to Seoul Design Festival to demo our product. But yeah, I'm struggling with making mine. It's not very easy. But yeah, this is a class that you can take if you want to um how to say, test like your skills, or at least create a portfolio. um and this used to be like, oh, it's not even major required. You used to need to take this to graduate, but now you can either take this or do a thesis or URP. So yeah, you can choose any of that. But this is, I think it's a good experience because you get to do one of the stuff that you actually want to do, like without any restriction. Like you can really actually do anything, and then you can present it to public. Yeah, so that's for the classes. Now I'm going to talk a bit about facilities that we ID students get. I think it's also quite cool and interesting. So in our building, the first floor of our building, we have a place called Kai's Audi Innovation Lounge. So this place you can there's a library part and there's a idea factory part. So in the library part, you can like actually just sit there, work there, read books. And then in the idea factory part, is this one. You have there's a 3D printer room. So we currently have like around maybe like 10, 12 3D printers. And then we have a laser cutting room. And then we have like some a soldering station. So because we are making circuits, so we need to solder them. And then that's for the like technical part. And then on another building, but it still belongs to us, we have a workshop. This is more like a wood what was it, wood, yeah, wood workshop. It's not a metal workshop. So over here you can like cut wood, do stuff with wood, and then you can do paintings, spray paintings. And actually it's not only wood, you can cut anything, but you can't, it's not a metal workshop, you can't do anything with metal. So yeah, you can like do sculpting, clay, pottery, those stuff here. Oh, yeah. So this is the layout of the audio lab. Laser cutter room, 3D printer room, the soldering station. There's a CNC machine room, but there's also a CNC in the workshop. And I actually want to share this a bit. Wait, I think I have to change the screen share. Maybe it's not like this. Yeah, so this is the website that you can visit if you want to know more about this facility. But I think it's only for ID students. idms.carson.kr. This is a small like tour. Like this is how it looks. There's the 3D printer room. So we have all this 3D printers. And then this is the laser cutting room. We have a laser cutter. Actually, we have two now, but this is not updated yet. And then this is the soldering station. This is the CNC machine room. Again, it's the CNC machine. Can we go there? Can we go there? Oh. Oh, you can't go in. All right, never mind. So for the workshop, wait. This is the workshop. Oh. Yep. So over here, you can work on your products. Like you're going to make your chair here. You're going to sand them
Right.
for days. That's quite tough. And then this is the spray painting area. So you can actually spray paint stuff here. And you learn how to spray paint properly. This is the CNC area. So you do drill, CNC, rotary drill here. And then this is for sanding, cutting. There's like a bandsaw, a table saw, grinder. Oh, there's no more sanding machine. There used to be a
Is this
sanding machine.
updated or because
I
when
think this is new. I haven't been here for a while. Like
uh,
you're going to spend first and second years.
I'm going to, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
first, second, and third year here, and then during third and fourth year, because you do mostly is UX UI, you don't really come here, and then you'll come here again on your final year, I guess. So wait, does it switch to the PPT if I just come here? Nabila?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's fine, right?
yeah.
Cultural events. So we don't really have picture for this, but before Corona, we had a few cultural events. So IDMT, it's where all the ID students, we go to a place and do some workshop. It's actually quite cool. Because like there's not a lot of students in ID, so you get to meet them and you get to meet all the professors. Usually all of them come, and we get to eat barbecue together and talk. And then there is ID night. We used to open like a bar, but I heard since we are not allowed to sell alcohol in school, 2 years ago before COVID, we sold like just food and drinks. And there's like a small cafe, like the building becomes a small cafe. It's actually quite interesting. It's at night, and then there's I usually ID spring party. It's like a welcoming for students, and also like this picture is taken from one of the labs in Kais. So like yeah, we just have fun. We eat, they give free food, and we just take pictures. And ID merch. So like the jacket that I'm wearing now, we also have this. Like actually all departments have this, but us we never change the design. I don't know if you can see. We never never change the design. So like it's quite cool. Like even if you meet someone from like who graduated 5 6 years ago, if they still have this, it still looks the same. It's just different numbers. Yeah. Next is pros and cons of ID. Nabila, you can start on
Me?
this part.
Oh, sure. For ID, there's a lot of Koreans, and because it's like group projects, you're gonna work a lot with them. And also because all of you don't sleep, there's like a kind of solidarity between all of us. And also because our classes are really project oriented, there are like no exams. So usually on midterm week or finals week, we take a break and stuff. And also, in my opinion, like the efforts that you put into your product actually translates into the result. Like maybe sometimes when you study for an exam, like sometimes it doesn't really work out even though you try really hard. But then for products, I think if you really try your hardest to like iterate and then like make a lot of stuff, like make a lot of prototypes, then I think it would turn out as you hoped. So that's like the pros of idea, in my opinion.
Yep. So these are what we think the pros, and the cons. You can also talk about
Oh.
this.
So for ID projects, you have to like sometimes you get some budget to work on your project, but sometimes the budget is not enough to actually accommodate for the kind of project you want to make. So like sometimes you have to actually spend your own money to buy some equipment and maybe to like go somewhere to do something and stuff. And also because like the projects are very like top to bottom. No, bottom to top. So like it's the whole process from like ideating, prototyping, and then like making the final product. It can sometimes be like overwhelming. So it takes a lot of time and you have to learn how to like manage your time well. And also, the majority of the people in ID are Koreans. So there's like quite a small international community. And because there sometimes in classes, there can only be like maybe two or one international student. Sometimes the professor like switches to like Korean in the middle. But yeah,
You don't have to be like it's not that scary. Like it's not like they're gonna neglect you, but sometimes like you're going to like you have to be used to like professors speaking to Korean students in Korean and Korean students speaking to professor in Korean. So yeah, it's just a note, I guess. But on one side, you get to learn more Korean in a sense.
right.
So yeah, I think yeah, that's what we both thought of. Like these are the pros and cons. But I think this pros is actually very unique to ID because we as a department is very small, and because we have a lot of really like every semester you're going to meet, you're going to do group projects. So you actually get close to people easily, like just because you work together with them. So that's cool to get connections here in Korea. Yeah, so what do we think about the prospects of ID? What will learn? What will you learn after like taking ID as a major? I think number one is you develop your communication skills. Definitely, you're like not only like making good graphic, like visually good, but you also make good graphic design in a sense that you explain things easily with pictures. So that skill will definitely improve in ID. Even if you can't draw, like me, I really can't draw. My drawing really sucks. And then you also like get to work on your presentation skills, like how you present stuff, how you make the presentation. And since design has become a universal skill, it's something like coding. I think coding has become a universal skill where if you put it in your resume, it's good. Even if you don't major in ID, if you minor in ID, whatever your major is, I think it still adds to your reputation. Being able to design stuff and communicate your ideas, even if you're biology, even writing paper nowadays requires you to communicate your idea well. So in that sense, I think you can learn that out of ID, and you can learn practical skills that helps you find a job. So for example, if you do editing, photo editing, 3D modeling, prototyping, even like in mechanical engineering or other stuff, you learn about this 3D modeling, and here you might learn a bit deeper. And like prototyping skills, I think is very good, especially if you work in R&D field, I think, to be able to quickly create something, to test it out and to see the feasibility. And then in Korea, if you want to work in Korea, there's a growing job opportunities for ID students because UX and UI is really rising. It's becoming quite huge. So in that sense, it's good prospects. All right, so that is all for our prepared presentation. It's more like a sharing session, but yeah, from now we're going to accept questions, and yeah, feel free to ask us anything, like even if it's stuff that we already said or our take on something related to ID. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you, Nabila and Edwin. And just in case some people didn't see the link, I'm gonna send it again in the Zoom chat. So if you have any questions, please open this link and write it down. And you can vote as well for which questions do you think are interesting, right? And that will be prioritized. So there are some questions right now, and I'll be reading them out loud.
Edwin, do you have the website open? Like the Slido one?
The what one?
The
Slido?
Slido one? Yeah, the one in the
Oh
chat.
yeah, I have it open. Do you want me to show on chat on stream on the?
No, I
All
also
right.
have it.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I have it open on my other
So
screen.
for the
Sorry.
for the first question, uh, the participants want to know, what subject would you consider the most difficult on industrial design?
Edwin, do you want to go first?
Me?
Yeah.
Definitely. For me, it's personally, it's UX design. I would say that as you go along, like the higher level classes are definitely more difficult, but UX design is the first time where you actually have to implement like this design process from ideation to prototyping, like fully. And you have to create a system, so it's a bit difficult. So yeah, I think that's the toughest class just because of the scope of the class. It's a third year course, and it's larger. And then like workload wise, actually system design requires more. Like after third year, there's a 4-year class called system design. It actually takes more effort, but because you are used to, I guess, you know how things go, so it's a bit easier. Like the burden is less, but as you go up, the scope of the projects becomes larger and larger, so I guess it becomes harder. Yeah. Nabila, what do you think?
Uh, I've only taken like until the junior courses, so I haven't really taken UX design, but I've heard like many things about it. But for me, until now, the hardest class I think for me was like interaction prototyping, because that one I think compared to the others, they mainly focused on like the shape design and like coloring and like the appearance, but this one is very like low level in my opinion. Like you get dirty with Arduino, you learn about how circuits work, how to like calculate stuff, capacitors and resistors. And I think in terms of workload, it was also quite hard, like quite a lot. So for me right now, it's interaction prototyping, but I might change in the future, honestly.
Yeah.
So would you guys say then that the uh, learning curve is quite high for ID? Like the first courses, they're hard, but as it goes on, even though the courses are harder, since you have experience, they're actually much easier for you to do.
Mm, yeah, I think it's not really like a curve like that, but you start off actually quite like it's all a difficult course, since I think it'll be new to anyone except if you like learn design in your like high school maybe. But because everyone starts off on the same foot, they don't really expect much in your first or 2 years, as long as you put in effort and do all the classes well. I mean, like follow all the classes well, I think you're going to survive. But like starting from third year, they really challenge you with this. They really critique your ideas, I guess, like how creative you get. So in that sense, it becomes a lot harder, and they also becomes more critical. They expect more from you. That's why I think third year is the probably the hardest. Um, yeah.
All
I
right,
guess I
thank
would.
you.
I
All
guess
right,
I would.
Nabila.
Yeah, I think I would like I agree with what Edwin says. Like I feel like with experience you would have like a better estimate of how you could like approach stuff, but when you actually do it, it's also like still hard. But it's just like because you've already gone through it, you try to think about like the least painful way to fail or something. Does that make sense?
Please do it to fail. You're expecting to fail?
Yeah. Like least the most painless way to like reach success, you know?
That is true. That is true. Or a rich failure in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you for those answers. They're helpful. So let's proceed to the next question. So another participant wants to know, like, if they're just gonna take an ID course for fun, if they're not planning to major in ID, which course would you recommend?
Nabila or me? You want
Mm,
to go first?
I think for me, like basic design, I guess. Because I think in that class you really get your hands dirty. And at the same time, that's when they start like criticizing your ideas. Not like really heavily, but more like, oh, why did you make the shape like this? Why did you make it like this? And I think that's like a really good introduction to ID and like what you'll actually face in the long run.
Yeah, so I think the question like depends whether the person actually wants to, like, how does you actually want the credit to be spent, like, do you want to burn the credit or not? Because like every courses they have the basic electives, right? Like you are allowed to take basic electives of up to three. You have to take like 9 credits of basic electives anyway. So if you don't want to burn your credits, I think I recommend the basic electives for ID, which is either uh, either design introduction to design in spring or idea and expression in fall. Personally, I would recommend taking idea and expression just because it's a practical class. Introduction to design is more of a theory class. You are expected to write a small essay by the end of the class, which is not really helpful. In idea and expression, you make stuff. So they by the end of the semester, you are, if it's still the same, you are going to make a sandal out of paper, and it's a group project. It's quite funny actually, like making sandals out of paper. But yeah, it's like this class teaches you a bit about how, basically it gives you a sneak peek of what an ID course is. Like you make a small sketch or rough ideas and then you make them. and then you get to work in team. But the workload is a bit heavy compared to introduction to design. But I would definitely recommend this if you have to have credits for basic electives left. If you don't, I think basic design is a very good like Nabila mentioned, basic design is a very good class to take. And if, for example, you use all your basic electives credit already.
All right. So it sounds like all the ID classes are fun since all of them are like project oriented.
Fun, yeah.
Right.
Okay, all right. Okay. Then regarding the major itself, uh, compared to the other major you have, because both of you are at least doing double major, right? Or minoring in another department. Would you say that ID is an easy major?
Nabila?
Why is it only me first? Why is it
All
only me first?
right,
Okay.
I'll go first. I'll go first. I'm taking ID and CS. Oh, Nabila, actually, Nabila is also taking ID and CS,
Yeah.
but um, would I say ID is an easy major compared to the other major I have? Like talking with my friends, personally for me, I would have not survived if I were to take other majors in KAIS because I simply don't like the exam settings and I don't really study well. Um, for me, it's definitely easier in the sense that I don't have to study. I really hate studying. I don't know why I came to KAIS, but yeah, I'm just lucky ideas here. But when like I talk to other people and I like we talk about what we do, like especially first and second years, we talk about like my friends, we talk about what we do in class. A lot of people they see me and they go like, oh, I don't think I'll survive an ID. So in that sense, I don't really know how do you compare two majors. It's just that what I want to say is in ID, mm, it's just very project based and very time consuming. As long as you put in the time and try to communicate your ideas, it's definitely easier. But I've seen people fail too just because they don't put enough time, put enough effort. And the problem is that with CS, maybe if you're good at with like other classes, if you're good at studying, then you can like you can study on them. But in ID, you actually have to make a product, finish the product, and you have to present them in front of professors. So um yeah, I think in that sense it's easier and also difficult. Yeah, that's that's my take on this. Nabila, anything to add?
I'm technically in the same position as Edwin because I'm doing like double major in CS and ID, and until now I've done mainly CS courses. So just now, like I'm starting to take like ID courses because I'm like almost done with my CS credits. But I think after doing so much of CS and then diving into like ID, like it's really like it's a different way of thinking about stuff. Like maybe it's right that like sometimes for CS or like um other majors you have to do like exams, but in terms of like the amount of effort or like the was it the pressure, I guess, to like actually deliver something is very high in ID. So like for example, if I maybe do homework in CS, it's actually like more relaxing for me than doing like the ID project, because for the ID when you actually have to make something like finished and stuff, I wouldn't say they're it's easier, but like I think it's just a different approach. So sometimes when you're working on one thing, it's hard to switch to another because you have to actually change your whole mindset because it's like a different way of like approaching stuff. So yeah, I think it's the same for like any, like if you switch from one of your majors to ID, I think you kind of have to change like your mindset before switching back to how you work with the other. So it's not an easy thing in my opinion.
Mm. And also like an ID, I guess we don't really have most classes don't have homework and stuff. So all your scores is like 90% based on your final project. So it's a do or die thing. You actually have to finish your final project and you actually have
Right.
to deliver something. If you kind of fail, then yeah, it's trouble for you. So you actually have to manage your time well, create your timeline, how you want to tackle things. Like it's very like it's actually up to you, everything. Like for example, in CS classes, usually your projects or your classes, they're divided into steps, right? And those are quite helpful. In ID, we don't really have that. You have feedbacks from professor, but at the end, everything is going to be graded at the final presentation. So
All right. Yeah, so I guess no major is easy. Like they're just challenging in a different way.
Right.
But actually, there's like a recent question that's I think very important. Uh, since ID is project based, right? Like how does it act? How does the class? How do the classes actually work in an online setting?
mm,
Um,
Because in your case, you're in
yeah.
campus right now. But I guess for those who are interested in taking ID courses while they're in their home countries, are you guys aware of any cases like that?
So do you have a answer for this, Nabila? I have.
um, yeah, actually, because I started taking a lot of ID courses when the pandemic started, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of impossible if you're doing like product design classes. Like you have to spray paint and like manually do something. But for some cases, for example, like interaction prototyping, maybe you have to work with like small Arduinos and cables. Like if you're in Korea, then maybe they can like ship some stuff to you so that you have like a starting point. But if you're like outside the country, you might have to buy the materials yourself. And some of the cases here, like my friends who were like in their country taking like interactive product design, they actually had to come here to like do a presentation. Because like so we have like this kind of hybrid presentation. Like if you really can't come to campus, then you might have to like you can do it online. But in terms of like making the product, you can actually make it like in your own home, but the materials are going to be really hard to find, and the resources are going to be really expensive for you, because here they actually provide you with like laser cutters, 3D printing, and all of that like spray painting stuff. So a lot of the people who are like currently in their homes actually like try their best to get to go to the campus to do their project.
Yeah, so like I actually do not have a lot of experience on this, just because uh the first semester I was taking a class where you do UX UI, so it's usually all software based. So there's no problem taking it through online settings. And the second semester, like last semester of pandemic, I took a leave of absence, so I finished all the stuff that requires how to say, like what the say, spray, like the question spray painting, and like physical, like you need to print some stuff. I finished all the classes. Now that I'm back on campus, I can take those classes again. So what I know is like some people, they usually choose all the classes. Like if you can see my screen, there are classes that you can actually do full online: moving image design, software prototyping, photo techniques, interaction, like interaction prototyping. So they usually like arrange these classes. They take it first, I guess, and they try to finish all these physical classes when they can come to Korea. But yeah, I agree. It will definitely be very difficult to do everything through an online setting. Like I know a friend who's taking like the class that Nabila is taking, interactive product design, and she just finally decided to come here. Like she first decided not to come here, because she has to do all this stuff in her own country. It's very difficult. The 3D printing, you have to pay for them every time you make. Over here, you just need to visit the building, print. You fail, you print again. But if you do it in your home country, you need to pay every time you print something, and yeah, it's very costly, and it's very difficult to get resources. So most people just end up coming here. And I think it's also a weakness since there's not a lot of international students, so they don't really create a very good system or mechanism for us. So yeah, it's kind of tricky, but there's no immediate solution for this. Going to campus is the best solution.
All right. So taking project classes is not optimal if you're not on campus. And then for the next question, in case you guys are like connected to some recent graduates, are you aware of job prospects, like maybe here in South Korea or in another country?
I think I'll talk about this first, since Nabila is still quite far from graduating, I think. Yeah, the job prospects, as I mentioned just now, it's actually increasing, especially in the field of UX UI. There are a lot of ID students that graduate and work in startups or even like companies like Naver or I'm personally acquainted with like very closely acquainted with just one recent graduate. He is currently working in Seoul in a startup that works on like video calling app. So I'd say it's easier compared to natural sciences department. And it's how to say it, like a lot of like you can actually apply for a lot of job positions, UX UI, video editing, photo editing, all this stuff like in-house designer, like graphic design. So the job field is very large, and you can also go into research if you want. So I couldn't I don't know numbers or like how it actually is, but according to my experience, it's actually like we have a lot of internship programs in ID too. We get emails like very often, like recruitment emails from companies wanting to work with us. So I guess in that sense, the job prospects is quite good. But then again, yeah, I'm not fully sure. I'm just right now going to start applying for jobs, so I can't really say anything. I'm not anywhere yet. Do you have any? Do you know anyone, Nabila?
Me? I don't know. Like I don't really know anyone who's like majoring in ID who like graduated and is doing the job. But from what from like in terms of like from the CS perspective, like if you're doing ID, it's like kind of HCI based. So HCI is like human computer interaction. And I think that really focuses on like the usability aspect as well. I think if you learn ID along with like CS, then like the prospect of like being able to have that really concrete understanding of like how to deal with users is like really good and adds like to your rep, I guess. And I've heard that like there's been an increase in like need of people who understand how to like make prototyping and like just what is it, understand the needs of the users more. So at least that's me. That's
Okay.
what
Yeah, so there's no shortage of job prospects. And Nabila, since you mentioned doing CS and ID at the same time, people are curious as well because both of you are double majoring the same thing. So they want to know like how hectic is it taking both CS and ID.
you want to go first, Edwin.
Hi, by the way, I am minoring, guys. So for me, my it's you have to it's like Nabila mentioned just now, you have to like when you take these classes, you have to switch your mindset often. So it's hectic, but a tip that I would suggest is that you gather ID classes in like one semester and gather a CS class in one semester. I do not recommend like in my like third semester, I think I took like CS classes and ID classes together. It was quite a hell for me just because of the fact that because I have to spend a lot of time to do the ID projects, I can't really study for my CS exams. So in that sense, it's quite difficult. It's better to finish like what Nabila is doing now, finish all your CS classes or finish all your ID classes first. That will help, but it's definitely hectic. There's two majors. They're famous for their
Workload.
yeah, their workload.
Yeah. I think I have the same, I would say the same thing as Edwin. Like, I think it really depends on how you plan your classes because some CS courses are like also really heavy. And if you do that along with a really heavy ID course, I mean, I feel like all ID courses are pretty heavy. So yeah, I think the best way is to just like do all your CS or like do all your ID. And if there's like a way is if there's like a part that actually overlaps that you need to overlap in order to like graduate, then try choosing one that doesn't like maybe do something that's just hardware or maybe just something that's hardware, but don't try doing something that's like the whole thing. Like I think that's gonna be overwhelming.
Yeah, you really have to plan your class well if you're planning to double major. Or you can graduate in, like, a lot of Koreans, they take extended semesters, but I think as an international is not really preferable just because of our scholarship. So yeah.
All right. So you need to brace yourself if you're planning to double major in CS and ID. And I think we have time for one last question. So this one is more specific uh, regarding the aspects of design. Uh, what are the things that you actually consider? Does it overlap with MSc, like a material science engineering?
Edwin, you want to go first, or?
All right. So if I get the question right, what are, does it overlap MSc? Do you mean like to be considered like I guess like the question is more like how what's the scope of like designing things? I don't think it overlaps with MSE just because you don't learn about the intricate structure of the material, but you do have to know like certain materials for certain designs. And as I mentioned, as it goes up, like as you go higher, you factor in more of these. So, for example, there's no way you can like, let's say you make a table. There's no way you make a table out of styrofoam, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, but it's not to extent where you have to make a table that you can deform and reform by heat and stuff. This kind of things, it's not like it goes as far as you want it to be, but there are a lot of factors. I don't know like all the aspects of, like, design is a very huge thing. You can consider um any aspect like that you want to focus on. So it's a bit, I need an example to talk about this. For example, a good project from last year's graduation project was someone used like the remainings of like the fallen leaves on fall, like those falling like leaves, those like wilted leaves, and then they grind it and they make it into a flower pot. In that sense, I would consider it more of a material design. So you actually take consideration of a material, but there are some who also like just make, for example, right now I'm going to, for my design project, I'm making a mat, a smart mat. So it's a mat with electronics in it. Yeah, I don't really need to consider that much of like the material. It will just be wood. But then I would need to consider how the functionality is, what kind of microprocessors do I use, what's the shape, what's how does it light up, how does it when people step on it, does it break, does it become dirty, how do I clean it, like those stuff. It goes as far as you want it to be. And I think that's also the point where you consider they consider the quality of your work, how much of an effort and how much of details do you put into it. So yeah, there are basic concepts that you have to always consider, such as usability, feasibility, and you're going to learn this along. But yeah, there also like design is like infinite. You can put all the details that you want and you can explain it. I think that's one of the reason why communicating your idea is important. Yeah, I don't know if that answers that. I hope. Nabila?
Yeah, I mean, I mainly agree with what you have to say, but from what I understood is like, so from what I understood from the question is like, MSE, I don't know whether you're asking whether we also learn about the theoretical aspect, but yeah, I think it's mainly about what Ed said, more like, if I use this, what would happen and what do I want the product to do? So, and then also in the long run, they also like want you to think about like production cost and stuff. So like, it's really more about like how, yeah, I mean, just material really plays a factor, but it's not really like something that you have to actually just put all your time into, I guess.
Yeah, and since most of the classes you're going to make a prototype, so in the end it's usually just going to be 3D prints anyway, like PLA, like those material
Right.
used for 3D printing. You're going to make it with them, and then there are going to be some electronics inside or something, and then you're going to spray paint it. Spray paint it. That's usually how it goes for your second and third year. But in your fourth year, yeah, you're free to use more materials.
All right. I hope that answers that question, and that ends this session. But for the participants, uh, if you're if you want to know like general information, you can access this Google Drive link. Here you can find the major tracks and the required number of credits, because some of you were asking in Slido like what are the required courses, so you can find that information in this link. Okay. And just a reminder that we will have more presentations later on today. Like right after this will be chemistry, aerospace, BBE, and there will be more. And I hope you participate in those sessions as well. And to Edwin and Nabila, thank you for sharing your expertise and for like helping these undecided freshmen to uh, know what ID is actually about.
Actually,
So,
can I take 1 minute to address this one question?
oh yes,
How do you guys manage with 50% Korean in class? As I mentioned, this is more of it's more of an exaggeration. I don't want to create misunderstanding. It's not really full Korean. They just they talk a lot in Korean in the sense that professor and students, they, when it's not class related, like when they express their ideas, they sometimes use Korean. So it doesn't really affect you. Like all their presentations are going to be in English, but professor's presentation are going to be in English. So it's just that you're going to hear a lot of this Koreans like in class. Even if you don't know Korean, it's going to be perfectly fine. So don't worry too much about it.
all right. I hope that calms any fear you have about taking ID courses. Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope you have a nice day. All right.